So welcome viewers. My name is Joanna Dos Santos. I'm a licensed professional counselor here with my colleague Brian Nandy, who is also a licensed professional counselor. We're both also life coaches. We're located in a private practice in Florham Park. And our primary focus is to take care of our clients that come in to minimize their anxiety, depression, any adjustment related issues. And here we are together recording these Zoom recordings for you, posting it on YouTube. By the way, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are welcoming our subscribers. We love comments. We want to hear more comments. We want to hear advice. What is it that you would like to hear us talk about? Maybe give advice on something. We are thrilled to provide you with that. So we are here as two licensed professionals that get together for our weekly talks, and we are enjoying every bit of it. So we figured that today's topic, and it might be a little bit difficult for some of you to listen to this recording, but it is on death and dying during the time of COVID, and how do we process some of the emotions, especially when we are not able or we're not able to see our loved ones. Some of our traditions and rituals may have been thrown off. And this is why we realized that it would be a good idea to bring this topic to you for those of you that might be interested in listening to this. So it is part of life. It is death and dying is part of life. And it comes with a lot of different feelings. Sadness. Can we say a little bit of happiness through the memories? But it is a topic. It is a situation that can be difficult to talk to, right, Brian?
Yes. The loss of someone, just to share, about a month and a half ago, I lost my godfather. It's just because my circle of friends had lost essentially our godfather, a man who had really during our younger 20s was a gay man who housed gay youth and helped those who were kicked out of their homes. And just about a month and a half ago, he had passed on. It was a very interesting grief process because there was anticipatory grief that had happened already. And
Yes.
COVID-19, there was a difficulty because how could we visit and all that and try and work through that process.
Now, I know, and I hope it's okay to ask, was he in a hospital?
Yeah, he had a heart attack and needed help to get to the hospital. Thankfully, someone was on the phone while speaking to him, so the ambulance was able to get him. But I had called, and it was going to take him up to Father's Day, and he had not responded to my call. And it was about 2 days, and then another, godson called, and then that got. So he was in a hospital, and we couldn't visit him because in the initial process, right, they were only allowing one person or the executor essentially who to visit.
Yeah.
So that was sad. It was a sense of helplessness.
Yes. So, you said sad, right? It's sad to lose loved ones. Um, Loved ones. I just had a train of thought, and beauty of therapy, beauty of this is being aware of our thoughts and being aware of how many losses we may have encountered. I know you lost your godfather in July. I lost a good close friend of mine also in July, even though that we didn't have necessarily the contact for the last few years because of your own responsibilities. It's still processing, and it's still sad, and it's still the part of it takes you back to the memories, right? You cherish a lot more. And this is in July, so the lack of maybe some visitations, right? But if we're going back even further, you said hopelessness, right? Is
And helplessness.
helplessness, I'm sorry, is for those individuals who have lost, and I feel for them so much. Not that I don't feel for the other, I feel for all of us who have lost, but for those who were unable to see.
Yeah.
And how do we process? How did we process? If we processed losing our loved ones with inability to see them, maybe physically, because all of that in March maybe through June, maybe some states still today, is we are able to see them only through iPads, right? Through these video calls that a lot of nurses were doing. And I'm grateful that they were able to do that, to utilize technology. Thank God for technology, we can say today. But this part of loss of a connection in some ways, to how do we grieve someone that we have now truly loved and we have not been able to see them because now they're in a hospital for however long and we cannot say our final goodbyes, to then not able to, I said rituals, not able to maybe having had funerals or wakes, whatever religious traditions were because of the COVID, the pandemic. So I know we mentioned it before in our private conversation. It's almost like delayed grief, unprocessed grief.
Yeah, unprocessed. And for those, kids who can't visit because they're, of the age where they can't do hospital visits yet during this time. So also there's talk about unfinished, right? It's a prolonged process and there's no sense of ending.
Mm-hmm.
The sorrow continues.
I mean, what are the feelings are associated with losing someone, right? And how we lose them. I should have done this. I could have done that. We all have this, even pre-COVID. I think when someone passes, we always find ourselves almost questioning that we could have done something better. And maybe that's something that brings comfort to many of us. But to not, I said unprocessed grief, but to not deal with death and dying, to not grieve is to suffer.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's so interesting because there are those who, if we had to tie in a conversation we had the last time, but those who are victims and do not feel sorrow for the person who is passing, for that loss of, and not having to have that closure, they have the sense of it's the right thing to appear that I'm grieving.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought that just came to mind because I'm currently having a case where the person is not grieving the loss of a loved one.
So then,
Spectrum of it.
and another part is, right, is how long does grief last?
Mm.
Is there really a time frame for this? I don't think there is, but
Hence the concept of mourning, right? Besides the rituals, there's a reawakening of loss or the remembering of loss every time they remember the initial loss. And suddenly it's alive again. The memories, the contemplation, the reflections. And as you had said just now, right? Like in that reawakening, what can be healthy, I guess, is like those bittersweet feelings that even sometimes, in the beginning, it's maybe not so loving because the sweet memories simultaneously bring up the loss. And grief, I saw a quote one time, grief is the last act of love in regards to the attachment, right? It is grief from a place of love, but it's a loss of love. So in the spectrum of love, it is on the lower end of depression, but right, its roots are from a place of also loss of object, loss of love, separation. And in essence, right, a client had said, I can't hug a memory. I can't hug the memory.
yeah.
And how do we evoke through memory and sorrow and the sweetness in memories, right? Amidst the bitterness, the presence of absence. How do we honor it, not just grieve it?
I mean, once again, this part of ability to communicate, with those who are here. I'm thinking at the same time, how do I honor the memory while at the same time, and I'm saying this, I think, based on what I've heard many clients say. I had a client who lost 4 people since May. And three of them were to COVID. Another one was just health related issues. And it has, there's almost no time to process one because another one happens. And also the part of not being able to see them. So it's almost like there's such an anger and a loss because we don't know what grief looks like. That's what I feel like I'm hearing a lot of individuals say to me is, what does grief look like now? I don't have the traditions. I didn't see them. I was unable to see them. I cannot see my family. Um, Funerals, like I said earlier, funerals or wakes, inability to go to those.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about early on, and still somehow mourn, cry, grieve, um, and not knowing how, because now the whole purpose of some of these rituals is to mourn, right? Is
Yep.
to grieve,
A
is to
communal
process.
experience.
Yes, 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 yes. And to share those memories. I mean, I remember for me, I mean, thankfully I was able to go to the wake in July, of course, with the measures that needed to take place. But this part of being able to look at the pictures, being able to, look at my friend and being able to almost like process and cry was okay. And also the part of sharing what family member did not know. Once again, like who is it that we're able to see at some of these wakes, right? Funerals versus who is it that we're not seeing, that we cannot share. And I feel sad, I'll say, for those individuals who have lost and have yet to grieve or are trying to still process how to grieve. Um, right.
I think in moments like this, I was thinking about a conversation we had about like, how do we give meaning to what matters? If we had to think about what matters in life in this time,
Mm-hmm.
how do we give new meaning? Yes, perhaps it's one of the new coping mechanisms we've got to really consider.
Well, the part of grief mourning, right? Isn't it about just slowing down,
Mm.
right? It's about to slow down, to maybe process, to acknowledge some of these emotions and to rethink. But it's hard. And I think I'm speaking for some of the individuals that I have spoken with, whether it's through therapy, through coaching, is what I find is I'm lost. How do I find what you just said? How do I find a meaning? I'm not motivated.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And that transitional space that the patient gets with or client gets when having a session, really the holding experience. How do we
Mm-hmm.
enter this loss, right? Such a interesting opposition of words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Embrace,
Mm-hmm.
but loss, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in the transitional object, sometimes we have items, right? What they call wounds or things that we will inherit that are sentimental that help us hold on to someone we've lost as a transitional object. But for those who we don't have a transitional object, it's the experience that we've internalized of them, introjection, right? What we've taken in, perhaps things that we've now done based because of a conversation or an interaction or in
Mm-hmm.
that relationship
Mm-hmm.
that has caused us to take a different path in life, and it was because of this one person,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether it's a friend or a family.
It's almost like learning how to find a new meaning, right? Because of all these new traditions and rituals. Um, Hearing clients say, why me? Or the part of anger being where they were all by themselves, they were all alone. And yes, they were. I mean, maybe bluntly said, but we all pass alone. We all die alone. And by having the gatherings there, it allows for that mourning. But not to have that gathering, once again, there's a lot of different feelings I feel like associated with this, where we have
I
to
think,
find a new meaning.
just to piggyback on what you said about we do die alone, and that's why I think during this COVID time, it's how important it is to feel that we do belong.
Mm.
You know, especially for
Mm-hmm.
those who feel like they don't belong. At least to know that that there are parts of me, there's so many good parts of me that I may take for granted or not even know. But I too belong to a collective of me, that I too have meaning because of the different parts of me, and I
Mm-hmm.
can make meaning out of this life.
Mm-hmm.
So that my transitional periods are not so alone. Because grief, right, in a sense, has or loss and mourning
Mm-hmm.
has a connection to depression and melancholia,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
They're on that spectrum of depression, um, and um, and in that depression, in regards to low energy, we have now time to preserve and to question mortality, right? What is the meaning of life, and who am I? And am I on a treadmill of success?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know that sometimes the things we do seem more important than the relationships we have,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's just life, you know. Since we seem to, you know, we all have a very very fast pace. Like I think COVID-19 allowed us in some way to attend to our own needs better, to attend to our gardens, but also attend to our own relationships, which I believe in the beginning, I feel like that there's
Yeah.
stages to this COVID-19, right? One,
Mm-hmm.
first there's like too much of each other, and then
Mm-hmm.
transitions to how do we become enough for each other.
Right. How do we, you said something earlier at the part of wanting, taking care of ourselves, right?
Yeah,
Finding a
self-care and
meaning.
attending to our needs.
Yes. And I'm thinking, of how many unanswered questions there were, right? When a COVID's begun. And there still are. I think many individuals are still questioning, and I, hear this, when will I be able to have this funeral that I wanted? I mean, for my loved one. Um, or this week or to celebrate because not many of us are still comfortable seeing each other in a presence, and that goes with friends, that goes with family members, travel issues, right, that are going on. So the only way that they are grieving or getting to know themselves maybe a little bit more is through these webinars, through these video chats, video conversations. I'm glad that it's there for that reason, because we're able to at least to talk to someone or have a phone. But the other part of it too is, now that I'm thinking about it, is to learning how to process this grief and the mourning by communicating, by by thinking about the memories that we've had. How can we utilize maybe some of these moments and move forward? I have a client who's lost a loved one, and it was a family member, their shoes, and she
Mm.
wears their shoes, and says, this is what kind of keeps me going. And it's so good to hear that. Um, I think, right? The ability to connect with the loved one through maybe a material thing, to learn how to kind of process this, because that's the only thing that they had, the lack of, whether it's funeral, lack of the wakes, those rituals that we have all been, I don't want to say programmed, but we have all been raised with, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like grief, right, in the sense of when we're crying, when we miss them, we remember them. There's a duality there. When we are crying, you know, with all our hearts and you know, the ugly cry, as they say, we simultaneously are experiencing the presence of them. There's a very interesting ambivalence of this loss but found, missing yet present, absence and present, missing but remembering, right?
And right, but that's such a normal part once again. And I read it in some article, and maybe I'll be able to find it and put it at the end of the website. Is especially when it comes to our loved ones, we're so used to them. We see them, and we're not that we're dependent on them, but we have our own sort of structures with them, whether it's lunch once in a while or a particular phone call, whether it's in the morning or at night. we have it. So it's almost like pre-programmed into our brain. It's already there. It's a habit. And then when that person passes, I remember that for myself when I lost my mother, now what? Oh my goodness, 12 years ago, almost 10, 11 years ago. The part of losing her and the part of a day, a week, a month later, wanting a thought, random thought comes in, and what do? Pick up your phone call to call just to catch yourself in the moment. Ah, they're not going to be there on the other end. And then you burst into tears. And that is okay. Why? Because we're so used to seeing them, hearing their voice, having our conversations, or whatever it is, and now no longer not having it. So it's only natural for our brain to still continue on wanting the same, having the same, because now it has to reprogram all over again, knowing that that person is not there, and now that it has to become a memory.
I'm looking at time and just want to be mindful about like, and to be mindful when you were saying questions just now, I think one of the main questions a lot of people ask, I wish I could have done more. Could I have done
Yeah.
more? Or
Mm-hmm.
and all those unanswered questions. And I think it's very important for people to not judge themselves from a place of lacking, like as if they did not do more. And perhaps the way to go to those unanswered questions, could I have done more, is perhaps what's the next loving thing to do? And perhaps
Mm.
the next loving thing to do is to appreciate what we did have versus what we
Yes.
don't. Right?
Yes, and we're so quick to go there, right? I could have done more. I should have.
Should have.
I could have had more
Winning it
time.
too.
Yes, we all do this. Viewers, we all do this. We
Yeah.
all have caught ourselves thinking this. I found this, with myself when I lost this friend in July is, oh, I should have just called, or I should have just made a contact. And now I know I cannot, but I could at least acknowledge it. I could reach out to her family members to maintain some form of a connection, right? So we can all do things. It's not necessarily living with what you just said, not
Not be,
focusing so much what we didn't do or what we should have done, but what we can do move forward.
should not be
Yeah.
punished by grief, not to be punished by guilt and regret, but to grieve from a place of, as an act of love. Um, you know, it's painful.
Hmm.
The depth of one's grief will reflect the height of one's love for that loss.
Yeah. And you said guilt. Guilt can be so powerful,
Yeah.
right? Where we can feel guilty about a lot of things. But you're right, to find gratitude, to find, even though it's difficult, nobody ever said grief is easy. And especially now or since I'm going back to March because that's what it was with us moving and separating, closing down in March. And then, some of these individuals needing to deal with loss, is that it was different. It's not necessarily, I could say honestly, I could relate to, I could understand it and I can empathize with it, but I cannot relate to it because I was hopefully not going to wood, not in a situation where I couldn't see my loved one physically. So I
And to
could
not rush
only,
it, just
I'm
like when,
sorry?
just like I believe the conversation we had on forgiveness, that we can't rush it.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
Just,
Mm-hmm.
just to have space
Mm-hmm.
to breathe.
And you know what's so common too, and just to kind of throw this in here is you said time, right? Not to rush it. It's one of the bigger things that comes up also with grief is why am I still crying? Why, it's been 3 months because, this is the way you're processing this versus maybe someone who is not crying at 3 months. There's no rule book that is written of how you're supposed to grieve. There is stages of grief, but there's no necessarily a time frame.
And it's sequential
So
order. There's no sequential order, right? So, and
yeah.
I think it's important to know that we are allowed to have quite a few feelings at the same time. It doesn't just have to be grief. It can be anger.
Yes, so can we just go over those 5 stages
Mhm.
really
The
quick?
famous stages of loss is,
Mm-hmm.
by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and the stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Acceptance, yes. And none of those come in order. And I'm speaking from my experiences, whether it's with this friend or with my own mother. There was times where I definitely denied it. Nope, not yet. Phone call made and move on. The part of anger, bargain, no, it didn't happen. No, right? There's so many different feelings and emotions. Today I can accept, tomorrow I can be angry. And it is the part of this grieving. And hopefully with this COVID, our viewers can also understand that whether there are emotions or not, or we don't know where they are, they're hiding. How do I grieve this? It's also part of it. There's no answer to necessarily knowing how to grieve. To grieve is at least process of moving forward. To not grieve is suffering, right?
To not grieve, I guess, like you said, just be mindful that there is a reason why the system, I guess, to use it from perspective of loss, it's it's teardrop versions of acceptance. Sometimes the idea of grieving or the loss is so big that we can't grieve all at once. We just have to do it in little baby steps or just little moments that seem to be acceptable to the system. And we all have different levels of tolerating pain.
Yeah, and just to kind of leave our viewers with too is there there is no almost a time window as to when you can cry. If you're crying while at work, you're crying while at work, you excuse yourself and you go. It's part of it. I'm sure people are very understanding, especially more so today, right? When we deal with losses. I mean, we hear about it all the time. Well, we will continue on hearing about it. And maybe it is something that would be even taken into more considerations with how we deal with loss and how much time maybe we need to also whether it's step away from work and deal with it and how much time we need actually. Yeah. So I
So,
hope our,
mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
Closing, I
You were
think,
gonna say
in
something.
closing, I think, I think that saying, I think it's really beautiful that when we miss them, we remember them. When we think of them, they are right there and within us. They're right here with us and they're right here within us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
Mhm.
to grieve is not forget because we'll always remember. So, all right, Brian, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for our viewers, our listeners. Once again, my name is Joanna Dos Santos here with Brian and Nandy. We are licensed professional counselors that get together once a week for our recorded webinars to provide for you on any topic that might be of your interest. All your questions are welcomed. And we appreciate your time and commitment, and we'll hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Journey with brightness.